Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher. In the excellent movie A Man for All Seasons, there's a scene where Lady Alice tells her husband, Sir Thomas More, to stay on the good side of a powerful nobleman. And Sir Thomas replies, "Whatever may be done by smiling, you may rely on me to do." And that's the subject I want to talk about today. Smiling. There's this odd notion I've seen about, especially in people with fewer social skills, that smiling is purely an autonomic reflex, that smiling is the involuntary reaction to a state of such enormous happiness that you can't just help but smile. It's like it's pulled from you onto your face and just you can't resist it. And that is the only proper form of smiling. That is the only authentic smiling, the only legitimate smiling. And hence, they get very confused by things like advice to smile, especially, you especially see this in commercial context, like where somebody who's working a cash register is supposed to smile at the customer, and people complain that this is deeply inauthentic. And I don't mean to suggest that things done in commercial venues are all without fault, because stuff often gets, done far too much, overdone, misused, and so on. So I'm not trying to defend that, but there's a big point that often gets missed, especially by people with fewer social skills, about the use of smiling as a communication, as a tool of communication. And that in particular, that smiling on purpose, not reflexively, is a reference to the reflexive smiling. So there is that smiling, which does happen when you're just so happy that you grin. Although even there, if you've ever experienced some really significant happiness, it's quite possible to be extremely happy and feel no urge to smile about it whatsoever, that you're just, you might describe that more as like a profound contentment or something. But essentially that even though you're profoundly happy, you don't feel like smiling, which again doesn't mean you're not actually happy. So the reflexive aspect of smiling is itself not perfectly understood, but an aside, really. Nonetheless, it is referenced by intentional smiling, so that when you smile at somebody, like when you see a person that you haven't seen for a while, and you smile at them, you are referencing that sort of thing, saying that this is a happy circumstance, not that you are bubbling over with emotion, but rather that the circumstance is happy in the sense of good. This is a reference, in point of fact, to the English word happy. It's one of the translations of the Greek word makarios. Makarios is also translated as blessed. You see this in the Greek, the Beatitudes. Blessed are the meek, for example, is also sometimes translated as happy are the meek, because the original word there is makarios. And it refers to a right ordering of the world, properly speaking, many things in a rational ordering to each other, wherein you have a greater good made up of smaller goods that relate to, rationally relate to each other. That is, you can describe that, by the way, as peace. That's another, peace is not the absence of hostility, but rather a right ordering of the world. You see that that's the Christian concept of peace. That's also like the Jewish concept of peace, and shalom. So you see that generally, that is peace. That it's, if everybody's dead, that's not really peace. That's just nothing. Peace is where people are actually cooperating and working with each other in an appropriate way. So that idea of peace, of happiness, is what's being referenced, because the smile is in part the automatic smile is in part a, response to that revelation, the recognition that things are rightly ordered. And that is what smiling intentionally is communicating, that your appraisal of the situation is that it is rightly ordered. In particular, that you and the person you are smiling at are in a good relationship to each other, where you intend to work together, where this person being next to you, being in your life in that limited degree, is in fact a good thing, a right ordering of the world as far as you are concerned. You would not smile at a person who was walking over with a hammer to hit you with it. You wouldn't smile at a person who's walking over with a knife to stab you with it, because these are wrong orderings of the world. And so that smiling is communicating to another person that things are fairly well, things are going fairly well, and you anticipate that they will continue to go fairly well. There's a closely related aspect, I think, that you can see in dogs. And I'm a little hesitant, but I don't want to go overboard on this, because I do think, some people are really, really into, dogs are these amazing, amazing creatures. I tend to fall much more on dogs are simple creatures that we project a lot of ourselves into. And one piece of evidence I offer in that way is only in modern, fairly desperate times where people are remarkably disconnected to each other do we tend to be this incredibly attached to animals and think of animals as this amazing. Whereas many extremely intelligent people in the past, throughout many cultures, did not regard, dogs and, pets more generally in this same sort of way. Modern people are very desperate and do this. More ancient people were not nearly so desperate and didn't do this. So, just a piece of evidence. But there is nonetheless something you can learn whether you do regard dogs as nearly human or regard dogs as animals onto which we project a lot of human qualities. And that is, dogs do lots of really bad things. Like if you own a dog, I don't, I used to. She's passed away. But, ripe old age, by the way, so it was, end of a long and reasonably happy life. The thing about dogs, they destroy all sorts of stuff. Tons of stuff. And especially later in life, they'll urinate on the floor and stuff. And, not every day, but fairly often having a dog in your house outside of a cage means that there's probably something that's going to be worse than when you left it. Possibly something you'll have to pay money to replace. And yet, it's very hard to stay angry at a dog because every time you walk through the door, they're just so damn happy looking to see you. They just look at you and they've got those big eyes and, they're panting, which looks a lot like a smile. Even, the corners of their lips pull back as they pant and their mouth is open. And they're so happy looking to see you. And people can't stay angry at somebody, even though you're seeing the terrible mess right there. Or the broken thing that you're going to have to pay $30 to fix or what have you. But the dog's just so happy to see you, and you can't stay angry at somebody with taste that good in people. I'm joking, of course, but the point is that smiling at you, that the dog does, just puts you in a frame of mind where you sort of realize, like, things are reasonably okay. And this becomes all the more important in human communication where you're about to actually talk, because this is a point that comes up. Words don't interpret themselves to you. You have to interpret words. And all communication, all speech is mediated through words. So the other person listening to you is going to have to interpret what you say. Now, tone of voice will help. But one of the big things that will help is context. Context will make a huge difference in terms of how people interpret your words. And if you start off when you're, coming to into the same room as somebody, if you start off by smiling at them, obviously I'm not talking about, absurd grins and, I'm not talking about absurd things, but if you just smile at a person so as to signify things are reasonably good, things are, within the normal levels of good, rightly ordered and so on. Hi. What comes out of your mouth next is going to be interpreted in a reasonably positive way. So if you have to criticize somebody, if you have to ask something, anything vaguely negative, it becomes especially important to begin by smiling because it signifies that everything that's going to be said needs to be taken in the broader context that it's not that bad. So if you're going to tell somebody like, hey, you messed up on something, we're going to have to do a bit of work to fix it. When you start by smiling, when you then, hey, unfortunately, you missed one of the things that we're doing. And so, we're going to have to go and fix that. That general tone, that general smiling is communicating that the information about to be presented is still in a positive context. This means there's work to be done. It's not, unalloyed good news. But that it is still, not a big problem. The world isn't ending. Nothing terrible is happening. This is especially important, by the way, whenever you're communicating with anybody who is at all insecure. The more absolutely secure and confident a person is, the more you can relax this a little bit. But it becomes incredibly important when that isn't the case. And in those cases, that lets them know, like, I am not rejecting you as a person. You are not in danger of losing your job. I am not going to dedicate the next 6 months of my life to trying to make your life miserable. None of those things are going to happen. And giving that sort of context is really, really helpful. So this is one of the basics, but part of the basis of well-developed social skills is learning to use smiling as a tool of communication for that very legitimate purpose of providing the context in which the rest of what you say should be interpreted. And in point of fact, when you don't do that, its absence becomes very noticeable, given this is how other people do tend to communicate. So it's sort of one of those doubly important things, because communication is done along conventions. All words are conventions and so on. But so is body language. Body language is conventional. And there are, of course, places that you should not be doing this. I've heard Russian culture is very iffy on strangers smiling, because they assume you're trying to hoodwink them for something. And smiling can be done to manipulate. All good things could be used badly. The mere fact that a thing can be used badly does not mean that, you shouldn't use it at all. But certainly, a used car salesman is likely to smile at you too. So, I'm not saying that all smiling, a person smiling at you necessarily is a person telling you the truth. It is possible to lie through body language, just like it's possible to lie through words. But it is especially important to use body language to tell the truth when you are trying to tell the truth. And so it's important when trying to tell the truth not only to use words to communicate the truth, but also tone and body language as well, which is why it's important to understand them. So anyway, for those who wondered about this whole smiling thing and whether it's inherently disingenuous or so on, that is the use of smiling and the proper use of smiling as a tool of communication. So until next time, may you hit everything you aim at.